Still, we have our second speaker up here, mic'd up and ready to speak. Please welcome Professor Jens Strüker up here. He's introducing us to sustainability aspects of blockchain. So just come on stage. Big round of applause, please.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. And it's wonderful to be here again. Last year I stand here as well. And yeah, it's still at least from my perspective, the coolest room here. Wonderful. And I know it's in the mornings. And thank you for having me here. And I want to speak about blockchain and how can blockchain help us really to realize ESG strategies. So ESG strategies means how can companies really come up with ways to be more sustainable in general. I will come to this, and at the end I will show you how a typical roadmap for companies can look like, and of course how blockchain and similar technologies can help here. Please, next slide. Yeah, I'm a professor for information systems in Germany, and I'm also head of the Fraunhofer Blockchain Lab, and this is my team. We want to find out where we can speed up decarbonization, or really more specifically, how can we help companies to improve sustainability management. It sounds easy, sustainability management, it's just another thing to do, but as we will learn to coordinate this with today's data management, it's definitely not that easy. So what we love to do is we love to come up with new concepts, we develop, and we also, please, next slide. Yes, thank you. We love to develop blockchain solutions, concepts there. We always try to challenge them, ours and others, of course. This is what our Fraunhofer Blockchain Lab is doing. And if you love that too, sure, well, then you're more than welcome to contact us and find out what we can do together or not. Next, please. Do you remember what was the last question in the Trump-Harris debate? Their TV debate? Does somebody knows? It was about climate change. Or better, about what can they do to fight climate change. And neither of them really came up with a good answer. Trump, there was no answer at all. And with Harris, it was okay. So the question is, what does it mean for companies and their fight for climate change? I would say, even though the American election campaign, what we realized or learned on Monday, on Tuesday, they more or less ignored climate change here in this. But companies really, just a second, but companies really do not. Today, sustainability measures on corporate level is so important, is a key business activity today. And then, of course, can you go back? One? No, this is perfect. Thank you. I have to apologize, but I don't see the slides here, so it's a little bit challenging here. Yeah, so I'm sure most of you will know these ESG strategies. This means here is you have heard about the greenhouse gas protocol. Maybe this is they differentiate 3 ways how to reduce, or where you can put the lever to reduce your carbon footprint, your corporate carbon footprint. And this means scope 1 is always you have processes in your company, you do things more efficient, for instance, you need less energy, or at least you will need more or produce less CO2 emissions. The second one is scope 2 is energy, directly energy. You buy that, you use that, and for instance, if you changed your supplier. Now you had, before that you had coal-generated electricity, and now you switch to, I don't know, PV or wind on this basis. Sure, you get the idea. And then, of course, we have scope 3 emissions, and this is interesting for us, of course, because this means products you buy or you sell. This could be intermediate goods or semi-finished products you sell to your customers, or you buy that. And the idea is you look at the entire supply chains. And it heavily depends on the product you are producing. If you're a manufacturer, of course, you have many, many products you buy. So for instance, we know typical customer, they do spices. They blend them, mix them, and they have more than 1.7 thousand suppliers. So if they want to come up with a carbon footprint, you can imagine what does it mean. Next, please. But in each case, if you want to reduce CO2 emission, or there's another possibility, you can compensate. So you buy or you invest $1, €1 somewhere in the world, and they will reduce CO2 emissions at their ground company, or you can, there are forestation projects, etc. And the idea is that this dollar or euro is more effective somewhere else than for you to reduce CO2 emissions in your company. Yeah. So, and from an economic perspective, this is okay. We will see where the problem here is. But in general, the idea is for companies, if you want to identify where's the biggest lever in my company in terms of scope 1, 2, and 3, how can I find that out? You want to derive appropriate measures for compensations, for reductions. You need data. And there we are. You need data. And today, this data, need for data, what kind of data, how granular, how hard in the sense of verification, etc. This is all driven today by regulations on the one side and on the market requirements on the other side. Companies today, they have started to accordingly to collect data, process them, and the idea here is that we see exponential growth in the need for data. And this is not trivial. I'm telling you the story because the scope of the problem, of the challenge here, oftentimes is not clear at all for people. So the regulatory requirements on the left side, you see most of them, or many of them, are European ones. The European Union, with their regulation, they are driving this game. But it's not that American companies, for instance, are not involved here. The results they have, they see the consequences, and they have to work with that. Okay, next slide, please. And however, it is really not easy for companies now to integrate, as I mentioned, the sustainability, data management, and the classical or the traditional data management. So we did a study for the European Climate Foundation 2 years ago, and we looked at companies, how do they do that? What is their progress? What's the status quo there? And we saw many, many unsuccessful decarbonization measures and decarbonization efforts, so to speak, in these companies. And it really was a rule, rather the exception, that we found out that companies, oftentimes they start short-term activities just to fulfill the regulatory requirements here, the obligations. But they ignored, or I would say not really ignoring, but they had no strategic developments in mind. And the consequence there is that today, for instance, in many, many large European companies, corporates, you find they collect data for investors, because investors, ESG criteria, they want to see progress there, they want to have some data. But this is reporting, and also reporting then for the I would say for legislation, for the governments, etc., regulation there. And they also want to have special data. And you store and you collect this data in a totally different information system, or you do it by hand. That's the rule, rather than the exception, as I said. And then, of course, you have some customers, because they have to deliver their customers' data or for their reporting. And all these efforts, usually, they are totally separated. Time-wise, this means it's always at the end of the year, you start, okay, somebody wants to have some data, and then different units in a company start to collect data. And you can imagine how expensive this is. And this is just the efficient part of that, the inefficientness of that. Okay, so we are convinced that if we better coordinate these processes, we have a great benefit for all of us. It's a win-win situation for the company, for their customers, for all the stakeholders, etc. For the states, of course, as a stakeholder. So the starting point for us for successful decarbonization measures here is decent data. And this pyramid should nicely, please go to the next one. Oh, it's not really working here. Can you go one back or? Okay, so sorry for that, but this is not the right one. Let me start with this one. We go further here. So I said the data is not there today. You do not have a really unified view on sustainability data. For instance, if you buy energy, and this energy you see, okay, what does that mean in terms of emissions? And this will then pop up in different information systems you need for different reporting, etc. And what we realized last year was that data quality is so bad today, you do not really know where the data comes from. And even further, when we look at compensation, that was a very drastic example here, we found out that millions of offsets you could buy, credits you could buy, were faked. So millions of them. Greenwashing is an example that greenwashing is a really big, huge problem here. So, and if you think further, what does it mean for a company? For a company, this means if you want to solve this problem, if you want to get trustful data, you need to address this information asymmetries. And this means you have to increase the level of trustfulness of this data. Yeah, so we need digital, in a sense, from a company perspective, you always want to scale measures, you want to scale your activities. So this means you need, of course, digital and efficient verification methods here. On the right, you see this example of a SSI, self-sovereign identity process, a verification process here. And this is a bilateral way, and this is why I put it here, for data sharing and verification process where you do not need any central authority. Next one, please. So the good news is, when we look at blockchain, combine that with these self-sovereign identities, so you know what kind of company this is. You have a digital identity, you have a digital identity of the asset behind that, maybe 1,000 of assets within a company. And then you have things like zero-knowledge proofs. And this is interesting because then we can realize really data sovereignty. So we can stay in control. We put the proof close to the asset itself, etc. So we have a couple of ways to do this to enable really a secure and automated data sharing. And the idea is to really get better primary data, so real data that you can look at from end to end, and you can prove, was this data changed? Where does it come from? Where did it go? And so on. So the idea is we can get here tremendous efficiency gains in the process. And next one, please. And to add value at scale, this means, as I mentioned with the end-to-end idea here, is we have to deeply integrate verification in corporate information systems, so in ERP systems, not just in one company, but between companies. Then we have to decide on what does it mean for public infrastructure, so registries for identities. In Europe, we started there with the EIDAS process 2.0. It's the largest IT project in the European Union ever. It's a good starting point there, and we can work on that. But you have to do this for different areas as well. So for different industries, but also for corporate identities. Think of a car. Today we have the situation that in the electricity industry, we do not have a registry. We have a registry there today for things like PV installations or wind parks, etc., but not for electric vehicles. So when you put your car from Belgium to Germany and you want to charge here, nobody knows what an electric vehicle is. So just one company does, but not the entire system, and that's a problem. So there we have to see a lot of progress, I think, and we will. So we want to integrate that, and I'll come to the end. Next one, please. This was changed, the order here, sorry. No, it's okay. I can go back for just a second. The idea was here to show you, give you an example, and this was missing a couple of minutes ago. But the idea here was to show you the electricity generator. If he or she has a digital ID, because there's a registry behind that, and then he sign the amount of energy produced at his location at what time, or over what time. And then you have the possibility to either store the proof and combine that with fractional NFTs, for instance. There's one possibility. If you're interested in that, please contact me. We wrote a couple of papers about that. We have a lot of solutions, but many others as well. So the idea here is then the customer at the end can check on this verification really in a bilateral way. That's the idea of decentralized identities and proofs here. And it's not a question of should we use blockchain or not. The idea is blockchain can help here because then you can really scale the system and you don't have one entire database for in the world. This doesn't make sense at all. But we have to go deeper here. And now please, the next slide. Yeah, and this is where I want to end here. Where do we see companies today? Where's the status quo today? Today we see that often they start for short-term activities, they start with digital proofs, as I showed with this example of green electricity. The next step now is, at least in the European Union and all the companies who want to cooperate with companies here, is DPP, is digital product passports. This is very, very important for manufacturers, or will be over the next year, starting next year. So they want to make use of verifications for different parts in a process. And you have to report that, and others have to check on that, etc., etc. The car manufacturing industry in Germany is, I think they do a pretty good job right now with data spaces combined. They make use of blockchains behind that, etc. So it's a very interesting process here. But the ultimate goal is really carbon management. So from a reporting perspective, to tell somebody something that happened in the past, to come to a situation where you really now can, in real time, manage CO2. This is a totally different story. And this is the goal. So this means, for instance, you are a steel manufacturer and you know, okay, right now, on a high granularity, I can buy, time-wise, I can buy electricity according to CO2 intensity on the market, and I get different prices for that. It's, in general, it's possible today. Yeah. And you see that, there are different CO2 intensities, and according to different criteria, price is one of them, of course. And then you have on the other side, you see, I can really manage these processes. What about the thresholds, my KPIs, during a year, during a period, a quarter or whatever, or a day maybe. And then you combine that, so you really manage CO2, you start to do that. And blockchain, again, is important. I talked about that on a general level, but it's really important to understand that over the last 10, 15 years, my impression is we try to bring in blockchain for use cases where we already had a lot of, or a couple of good solutions already. In many cases, at least, it was that case. And now I see here we have use cases where this is not the case. Blockchain alone is not a solution that is sufficient, but in combinations with other technologies, this is great. And here's a great, great potential. Yeah, thank you so much.
In light of the time, we have time for either a bit longer or two very quick questions. So, you again. You have the question subscription.
Thanks for your presentation. I have one question, and may I ask you one question about do you have any idea about which kind of blockchain will you use and why do you use this? Because maybe now there are Ethereum, Solana, or other or Hyperledger like this kind of blockchain, and which one do you want to use, or you have your own blockchain, and why do you have this choice? Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So think about the situation. You have a worldwide, for hydrogen, for instance, a proof of origin for hydrogen. In Germany, in Europe, we have this famous German institution, the TÜV. So they have centralized their authority, a centralized database, so to speak, and they say, okay, we check on that, and then you can ask us for the proof, and you pay for that. The problem is that when you look at the supply chain for hydrogen all over the world over the next years, and that's coming, no Chinese company, no American company, as a part of this supply chain process, will give their data, their proofs, their certificates or whatever, or part of that, to a central authority in one country. So this is definitely one reason why we can make use of public blockchains at that level. It's not the idea that you will store all the data there, of course not, but the proof of, or at least where can I find the data, etc., etc. So it depends on the case. And coming to the question for blockchains, we looked at this, and it depends definitely on the use case. So with hydrogen, it makes sense to use a public blockchain. But we will have cases where it makes sense that we see, okay, this can be a hybrid blockchain, why not? So there's also state authorities involved, etc. Like in Germany, for instance, you have the Bundesdruckerei, they are responsible for printing money, etc. So, or the central bank authorities. So it depends, and they can play a role. Yeah.
Cool, thanks. It's a quick one, or somewhat? Okay.
Have you looked at what's running in the manufacturing industry? So from Siemens, we have built this Z Green, and we are an ID union. We have all these Bundesdruckerei and. So we have an offering And with Stanium, everything what you need to go through the value chain to collect your data. Yeah, and this is guarded by Hyperledger Indy for the identity. So it's there, and we started this 22. Yeah, so since 2 years and it's running. And digital product passport, it's also coming. We're working on this. So it's up. It needs some time. We have to collect all the competitors and so on to have this running.
Yeah, sure. This is exactly what I spoke about. The connection from starting from data spaces, etc. Right, with the X projects we see. There's a role for blockchain, and you mentioned ID unions. We see wallets coming there, and this is exactly the story. Stanium, and speaking of the Siemens, your Siemens solution there, of course, I mean, you want to find out where's the business model there. Sure, I think it's still on the way. At least that's my impression. And yeah, it's a very very helpful and very valuable contribution there. Absolutely. So it shows us where the maturity is today. We are on the way. That's good.
Cool. Thanks for your talk and the questions and the reply, of course. So huge round of applause, please, for Professor Strüker.